Evening, everyone. Myself, Prabjot Kaur. I am Assistant Professor in CSE Department of ABES Engineering College. Today, we are going to study Java exception handling. So, let's get start. Before we are going to understand what is Java exception handling, we need to understand what is exception. An exception is an unwanted event that interrupts the normal flow of a program. Means it is an unwanted situation that can break the program, that can terminate the program before it completes execution. To avoid this situation, Java provides a method which is known as exception handling. Exception handling allows us to handle the runtime errors caused by the exceptions. Before we understand why we handle the exception, we need to understand why exception occurs. There are a number of reasons. Some of them are poor network connection, if we having a poor network connection, that can also cause an exception. Second is bad data input. Entered by a user. If user enter a bad data, that can also cause an exception, which can break the flow of a program. To avoid this situation, we need to handle the exception. For this, exception handling is there that ensures that the flow of a program doesn't break when an exception occurs. Now, what is the difference between error and exception? Error indicates that something went wrong, which is not in the scope of a programmer to handle. Programmer cannot handle an error. A situation which cannot be handled by a programmer, that is known as error, like system failure, disk failure, unavailable of resources, these are some points that can cause an error. Whereas exceptions are the events that occurs during the runtime due to bad data entered by a user, or there is a programming logic error which can cause an exception. For this, Java provides a method known as exception handling to handle such type of situation. Now, in Java, basically there are two types of exception. One is check exception and second is uncheck exception. All the exceptions other than runtime exception are known as check exception. Basically, in check exception, compiler play an important role. Compiler will check the complete program of which is written by a programmer to see whether there is a method that can handle the exception or not. If there is no method written in the program to handle the exception, then compiler will throw an error message. Some of the example of check exceptions are SQL exception, IO exception, class not found exception, these are the check exceptions. Whereas uncheck exceptions, runtime exceptions are known as check exception. In check exception, there is a complete responsibility of a programmer to handle the exception. Compiler will not play any role in this exception. It is a complete responsibility of a programmer to handle the exception. Otherwise, program get terminated. Some of the example of unchecked exceptions like null pointer exception. I will return here. Null pointer exception, array out of array index, out of bound exception. These are the unchecked exception which can be handled by only and only programmer. It is a complete responsibility of a programmer to handle this type of exception. Now, there are some methods provided by Java provided by the Java to handle the exception. Some of them are try and catch block. A code or a statement that can cause exception is always written in try block. And to handle that exception, catch block is there. As you are seeing here, it is a syntax is written over here. A statement that can cause an exception is always written in try block. And statement that will execute after exception occurs is always written in catch block to handle the exception. Some basic example is written over here. I have taken the two variable num1 and num2, and in try block I have written a statement which can cause an exception. Num1 is equals to 0 and num2 is equals to 62 divided by num1, which is 0. This line of statement can cause an exception. So it is written in the try catch in try block. To handle this type of exception, there is a catch block which can handle this exception. And the output of this program is, first, you should not divide a number by 0. And after executing this line, flow of a control is there. That is I am out of catch block in Java. So there's a two output of this program. First is you should not divide a number by a 0. And second is I am out of try catch block in Java. I hope you understand this with the example. Now next is finally block. A finally block contains all the important statements that must be executed whether exception occurs or not. The statement present in this block will always execute regardless of whether exception occurs in try block or not. If exception occurs, then catch block will execute, and after that finally block will execute. But if exception not occurs, then after try block, flow of a control of a program will execute the finally block statement. See, example is there. In this line, exception can occur. When exception occurs in this line, then catch block will get executed, and after that, finally block will get executed. So output of this program is number should not be divided by 0, and after that, finally block statement will executed. That is, this is finally block and out of try catch finally. These are the three output that can come of this program. There are some important points regarding finally block. You can use try and catch block without using the finally block. It is not compulsory to use finally block. In normal case, when there is no exception in try block, finally block is always executed after try block. However, if an exception occurs, then catch block is executed after the try block and before the finally block. This is all about the exception handling. I hope you understand this term, this concept. This is all from my side. Have a nice day. Thank you.